class is a collection of related objects which having same behavior and characteristics. There are three access specifiers, that is private, public and protected. To close the class, compulsory after flower bracket must and should you have to write semicolon. Then only the class will close. In the program, when we are using input operation like scene as well as cout, for that the supporting header file is iostream.h. Welcome back to one and all. Myself, Vasanta, lecturer in computer science, Vidhyaashram, Pre-University College, Temple of Excellence, Mysuru. Today, we will start with the first session of Classes and Object chapter. The total weightage of this chapter in the annual exam, 6 marks. In part A, they will ask one question for 1 marks, and in the part D, one question for 5 marks. The total weightage of this chapter is 6 marks in the annual exam. It means that you will get one question in part A as well as one more question in part D for 5 marks. Whereas on this class, you will come to know the difference between procedural programming and object-oriented programming. What are the major difference between procedural as well as object-oriented programming? Then definition and declaration of classes and object. How to declare a class, how to declare an object, what do you mean by data members, what do you mean by member function, what do you mean by access specifier. Regarding that, today you will come to know. Now, one by one we'll discuss. First, we'll discuss about the difference between procedural programming and object-oriented programming. What do you mean by this procedural as well as object-oriented programming? This is very important question because usually they will ask the difference between procedural and object-oriented programming. Whereas in procedural-oriented programming, the name itself suggesting procedure. It mainly depends on the procedure. What exactly the procedure we are given, on that procedure only here it will follows. It mainly concentrates on procedure. Whereas in object-oriented programming, the name itself suggesting that object-oriented. It mainly concentrates on object rather than procedure. Whereas in procedural, it concentrates on procedure. Whereas in object, it concentrates on object. For example, if I want to reach from 4th floor to ground floor. In procedure oriented, what we will do? First, presently we are in 4th floor. First, we will reach on 3rd, then 2nd, 1st and then ground floor. Mainly depends on the procedure. Whereas in object oriented, mainly it concentrates on object. It will not bother first I have to reach 3rd, 2nd and then 1st and then ground. It mainly concentrates, I want to reach ground floor. That's all. Whichever method directly, whether they jump from 4th floor to ground floor or through lift they were coming, that doesn't matter here. It mainly concentrates the agenda, what exactly I want to perform. Whereas here, what is the steps? Which are the rules and regulations you have to follow? All the rules and regulations here we will follow. Whereas here, we want to reach the goal, that's all. Mainly concentrates on object, whereas in procedural, it mainly concentrates on procedure rather than data. Whereas in procedural, we have variables, whereas here in object, mainly we have objects. All the variables and here we have objects. User-defined data type. Here also we have user-defined data type, but here we used to call it as classes. And here structure members, whereas here instant variable declaration is possible. What do you mean by this instant variables? For example, if I forgot to declare any variables in procedure, then must and should I have to declare all the variables, whatever variables we required for the program in the beginning at the time of declaration only we have to declare. Whereas in object oriented, wherever we want, on that time we can able to declare the variable and we can able to work on that. That is instant variable. Then here we have functions, whereas here we have methods. In procedural, we have function calls. Whichever program we want, there we used to call the functions. Whereas here, we are message passing. This is a major difference between procedural programming and object-oriented programming. Because in the exam, if they ask, write the difference between procedural and object-oriented programming, then major difference you have to write. Like this way, how we are written in the board. In the same way, you have to write, you have to make 2 columns. procedural, and one more is object. In the same way, you have to write the answers. Then only you will get the full marks. Don't write any other things like it follows top-down approach, bottom-up approach, like that. Don't write anything. Only these are the major concepts you have to write. Now is it clear? Next, we will discuss about what do you mean by class, what do you mean by object. Whereas object is a real-time entity which having some characteristics and behavior. But when they come on class is a collection of related objects which having same behavior and characteristics. For example, if I am going to consider one mobile, on that mobile we have data as well as functions. Then this can be called as object. Object is a real-time entity which having some characteristics and behavior. This I am going to call it as mobile 1. One more here we'll take mobile 2. In this mobile 2 also we have data as well as functions. One more mobile we are taking, that is mobile 3. Here also we have data as well as functions. The collection of related objects. The collection of related objects which having same behavior and characteristics, that can be called as class. Class is a collection of objects that have identical properties, common behavior, that can be called as class, which having same characteristics as well as same behavior. Now is it clear? But when we come on definition and declaration of class, then how to define the class, how to declare the class, what do you mean by data members, what do you mean by member function, how to access regarding that, you will come to know on this. Whereas class declaration specifies the representation of object of the class, which is object, how to declare that, and set of operations that can be applied to such objects, which are the operations, which are the data members. Regarding that, you will come to know. In the exam, if you get a question, explain briefly class definition and declaration, then compulsory the first thing you have to write the definition. What do you mean by definition of a class? Then you have to write the general syntax to declare a class. For example, it starts with the keyword class, then user defined name. Whatever name you want, you can give. For example, I want to create a class with the name add. Then class is the keyword. Then user defined name is the name of the program. Whatever name the user wants, they can give. For example, I want to perform addition of 2 numbers. Then the class name, here I am going to give it as add. First, start with the keyword class. Then next, leave one space. Then write down the class name. Whatever name the user wants, they can give. Then the class is enclosed with the flower brackets. Here we'll open the bracket. Then we have 3 access specifiers. This is private, public and protected. Whatever access specifier you have to mention. The access specifier will going to give the scope of the data. The scope is nothing but whether the data can be accessed or not, who can able to access, where they can able to access. Regarding that, it will tell you in the access specifier. There are 3 access specifiers, that is private, public and protected. For example, here I am to take it as private. Then after mentioning access specifier, you have to write the colon, then data members as well as member function you have to mention. For example, I want to perform addition of 2 numbers. That's why here I will write int a, b and then c. This is nothing but data members. In the mobile, we have data contacts, is it not? That contacts can be called as data members. Then we have member functions. Then what do you mean by this member function? Member function is nothing but set of operations. Set of operation, it will perform a specific task. In this example, here in private section, I declared int ABC. ABC are the data members. Then I will write the functions. Void get data function. How we are identifying it as function? Here we have empty brackets. From that I can identify it is a function. Whichever functions you have, write down void compute function. Then afterwards, here we have opened the class, is it no? We have to close the flower bracket, then you have to put semicolon. Now it's clear. See this syntax. First, class is the keyword. Then user define the name, whatever name you want for the class that you can give. Then we have to open the flower bracket. Then we have to mention the access specifier, whether the access specifier may be private, public or protected. The access specifier will going to give the scope of the data. Scope is nothing but whether the data can be accessed or not. Regarding that, it will tell you. Whereas in this example, I took the access specifier as private. Whichever you want, you can write. Whereas in the syntax, we have to mention all the three: private, public and protected. In all the three, we have data members as well as member function. Then, what do you mean by this data members? Data members are the variables in the program which we are using. Whereas in this example, see, ABC, these are the data members. Then, member functions, set of operations. Whereas on this case, void get data as well as void compute. These two are the member functions. Then you have to mention in each access specifier data members, member function, data members, member function. In protected case also data members as well as member function. Then here we have opened one flower bracket that here you have to close. To close the class, compulsory after flower bracket must and should you have to write semicolon. Then only the class will close. Whereas in the exam if they ask, briefly explain class definition and declaration, then compulsory you have to write this syntax. This syntax itself carries 2 marks. Out of 5 marks, syntax itself carries 2 marks. And explanation carries 2 marks and example carries 1 mark there. Now we will explain each and every component of this class. See, class is a way of grouping objects having similar characteristics, whereas class name is the user defined name given to a class. If you observe the example, user defined name, whatever name you want, you can give. That is the class name. It is a user defined name. Then access specifier gives the scope of the data. Scope is nothing but whether the data can be accessed or not. If it is we are accessing, who can able to access exactly, where they can able to access. Regarding that, it will tell you. There are 3 access specifier: private, public and protected. If you observe the syntax here, we have 3 access specifier: private, public and protected. Then data members are the variables. These are the variables. If you observe this example, ABC are the variables. Whichever variable in the program we require, that we will declare here. Then member functions are the set of operations. If you observe here, void compute, these are the operations, functions. This ABC can be called as data members. Void get data, void compute can be called as member functions. Then class body is enclosed in a pair of flower brackets. Compulsory, you have to write everything, this data members as well as member function inside the flower bracket. Then at the end, compulsory you have to put semicolon to close the class. This is the syntax. And here all the whatever things in the class definition and declaration in the syntax we are getting, you have to explain everything one by one. Then we'll explain with an example program. Consider first we are declaring as include IOStream dot h. IOStream stands for input output stream. In the program, when we are using input operation like scene as well as cout, for that the supporting header file is IOStream.h. Then next here we are given the class name is add, because I want to perform addition of 2 numbers. Consider my agenda is to find addition of 2 numbers. I have to write one program by using class concept. On that time, the class name here we are given as add. Then here we will open the flower bracket. Before writing that, here we are opening one flower bracket because now we have started the class. Under that, in private section, we are declaring 3 variables in ABC. 3 variables here we are declared. All the 3 variables of type integer. We are taking 3 data members, that is A, B, C, all the 3 of type integer data type. Then we are taking the functions void get data, one function, as well as void display is one function. Void get data is one function, void display is one function. In void get data, we have statement inside the class definition. That is, here we will open one bracket. Here cout insertion operator. Inside the double quotes, we will write enter two numbers. Cout stands for output statement. Consider this is my output screen. In this output screen, here it is displaying Cout. In the output screen, it has to be displayed inside the double quotes we are written. Whatever thing in the double quotes you will write, that will display as it is. Then what here it will display? Enter two numbers. Whatever thing in the double quotes, especially in Cout statement, that will display as it is on your output screen. Cout. Cin means input statement. Cout means in the output screen, if you want to display anything, then we are using Cout. If you want to input some values to the computer memory, then we are using Cin operation. Then next, Cin. Extraction operator A, extraction operator B. For example, here I want to input 2 and then here I will input 3. Two values we are inputting here. That is get data function for input purpose we are done. Then next one more function we are taking, what? Display function. On this display function we are calculating, that is C equals A plus B we are calculating. Then we will display the result, that is Cout sum equals. See, inside the double quotes whatever thing we are written, that will display as it is. Then in the output screen sum equals, here it will display. But here once again we are insertion operator, then C. Then whatever value inside this, that will display. Inside this, what is the value we have? That is 2 plus 3 is 5. Here it will display. See, in Cout statement, if you write inside the double quotes, then it will not do any calculation. As it is, it will display. Without quotes, if you write some variable name, then whatever value inside that here it will display. Then close this function. Two function get data and one more is display function. Both the function we are closed. Then afterwards, here we are closing the class. See, to close the class, we have to put flower bracket, then one semicolon. If you observe the syntax, here to close the class, we need one flower bracket, then at the end, one semicolon. When you write the semicolon, it means that it is the class closed. Now see here, two functions, get data and then compute. Then later on, we are closing the class. Now in the main program, we are creating the object. Here this is the object. How to create object? First you have to write the class name. Here add is the class name. Then write in the object name. Whatever name for the object you want, you can give. Then to call the function, object.getData function you have to write. Then if you write that line, then this part here it will go to execute. That is object.getData, then this particular part it will go to execute. Then object.display function. When you call object.display, then whatever thing in the display function, there it will go to execute. Now is it clear? Then finally we are closing the main program which you opened. It means that in the exam if they ask explain class definition and declaration with an example program, then you have to write the syntax. Under that syntax, which are the variables you have, write on all the things regarding class, user define the name, what do you mean by access specifier, which are the types, data members as well as member function, all the points you have to mention. Then afterwards, you have to write one example. This is regarding class definition and declaration. Now is it clear for all of you? Next, we will move on access specifiers. What do you mean by this access specifiers? Already I told you regarding access specifier, we are going to give the scope of the data. Now, what do you mean by scope? The scope will tell you whether who can able to access the data or who can able to access the function, who are not supposed to access the data as well as function. Regarding that, it will going to tell you. Whereas every data members of a class is specified by 3 levels of access specifier for hiding data and functions internal to the class. And here they help in controlling the access of data members. It will control who can able to access, who are not supposed to be accessed. The access specifier defines the scope of the data. Mainly it is going to give the scope of the data. There are different access specifiers such as private, public as well as protected. There are three access specifiers: private, public, and then one more is protected. One by one we'll explain. Private access specifier. What do you mean by this? Private. Who can able to access here? I'm going to give an example. Consider the patient is presently in private ward. Then who can able to access? Only family members can able to access, as well as friends can also able to access. If I declare that variable is private, then it can be accessed by member function. With that, friend function can also able to access. Main thing, member function. Member function is nothing but family members. Here, whatever functions inside that class, they can able to access here. Just private ward alidre, family members. Family members as well as friends can able to access, is it no? In the same way, family members is nothing but member function can able to access, as well as friend function can able to access. While writing the syntax, class, then class name. Here we will open the class and then here we are closing the class. But here compulsory you have to write the access specifier is private, then data members, on that also we have data members as well as member function. In the exam, if they ask, explain briefly the access specifiers, then you have to mention what do you mean by access specifier, which are the types of access specifier. Then for all the three access specifier, you have to write the syntax as well as example. If you observe the example, here we have class name we are given as add only. Here the access specifier we are consider only private, then int AB are the data members, void get data is the member function. Now is it clear? Then three things you have to remember. One is access specifier, under that private. Private means only member function as well as friend function can be able to access, syntax as well as example. Next we'll discuss on public access specifier. Consider the patient is in public ward. Then who can able to see them? The family members, friends, as well as those who want to see or those who don't want to see, they can also able to access you, is it no? ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಪೇಷಂಟ್ ಹಾಸ್ಪಿಟಲ್ ಪಬ್ಲಿಕ್ ವಾರ್ಡ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇದ್ದಾಗ ನಿಮ್ಮನ್ನ ನೋಡಕ್ ಬರೋರು ನೋಡಬಹುದು, ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಬೇರೆ ಅಕ್ಕಪಕ್ಕದ ಬೆಡ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾರು ಇರ್ತಾರೆ ಅವರು ಕೂಡ ನಿಮ್ಮನ್ನ ನೋಡಬಹುದು, is it no? That means if I declare it as public, anybody can able to access it by any function, where it may be family members or non-family members or friend function. Anybody, member function, non-member function, friend function, anybody can able to access if I declare it as public. If it is private, then member function as well as friend function. If it is public, any function can able to access. Member function, non-member function, friend function, derived function, everybody can able to access here. While writing the syntax, class name as usual, only here we write public. Then here also we have data members, member function. Here we are closing the class. After flower bracket, we will put semicolon. While writing the example, class, the class name we are given as add. Here in this also in public section int AB are the data members. Then void get data is the member function. Here we are opening the class, here we are closing the class. Now is it clear? This is regarding public access specifier. And one more we have, that is protected access specifier. What do you mean by this protected access specifier? Here, if I declared it as protected, then member function can able to access, friend function can able to access, as well as derived functions of that class can also able to access. It can be accessed by member functions, friend function, and derived functions of that class. While writing the syntax, as usual, class name. Here we have protected. In this also data members as well as member functions. In the example also protected, same as usual, class name is add. Here we are just replacing it as protected. Data members A and B, member function void get data. Then how to remember this? Consider we have one patient. If it is private, then who can able to access? Member function can able to access, family members can able to access, as well as friend function can able to access if it is private. If it is private, then member function as well as friend function can able to access. If it is public, then who can able to access? Anybody. Anybody can able to access, where it may be member function, non-member function, friend function, derived function. Any function can able to access if I declare it as public. If I declare it as protected, then who can able to access? Family members. That is, member function can able to access, as well as friend function can able to access, as well as with that one more function can able to access here, that is derived function. What do you mean by derived functions of that class? I'm going to give an example. Consider the patient is under operation, or he want to go to the operation. On that time, generally the children are not allowed in the hospital, is it not? But on that case, if that patient want to see their daughter's son-in-law, then they can able to see her. Here, what happens? In protected, family members can see, friend function can also be accessed, as well as derived functions can also access here. These are the major difference between private, protected, as well as public. Private, member function, as well as friend function. Here, any functions, whereas in protected case, family members, friend function, as well as derived function can able to access here. Now is it clear? Next class, we will meet with the remaining concept of the same chapter. Thank you for all of you.